What in the 20s is going
In the
on?
20s,
Think about
yeah.
the 20s.
The 20s,
What
baby.
plenty.
Plenty.
What in the 20s is
I
going
am
on?
here for my 20s, baby.
This is the 20s.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Zamam Kize, and this is What's in the 20s, a podcast where you listen to me grow through its baby. On today's episode, we're going to be speaking about the truth of forgiveness. This is something that I feel like I'm learning more and more the older I get, is that forgiveness is like an emotional muscle that you need to constantly train and practice. Essentially, it's like going to the gym and working on that muscle, because I think very often I kind of just believe like if somebody does you wrong and you want to move forward, like, yeah, you just forgive, you just say, you know what, it's fine, I forgive you, let's progress. Until I realized that forgiveness doesn't happen once, not even twice. Forgiveness happens every single time you remember, every single time there are triggers, every single time there's something that happens and you just sitting there like, this is taking me back to something. And you just have to bring yourself to a place where you don't get angry again, or you don't get upset or accuse them again or get frustrated again. It's like it really is that like muscle that I think that sometimes stays dormant as long as you're not triggered, as long as you're not in a space where you're constantly remembering that pain, that betrayal, that hurt. And then when it happens again and you're exposed again, it's like everything comes back up again and it feels like you're being taken back to that space. And do you know, like the thing is, right, we're human beings, we have memory. And part of like why memory can be good is like it's like a protective mechanism. So let me use this analogy. Think of like a dog, right? If you haven't fed your dog in a very long time, so it's like a new dog, haven't fed them in like days or whatever, next thing you come and see the dog and it bites you or whatever it is, it's like, ow, that hurts. And now you have this memory where you're learning that like if I don't feed this dog, it's gonna bite me or attack me and all the rest. But because it's your dog, you forgive it, right? It's like shame. This dog, it's a puppy, whatever. It was hungry. I forgive you. I understand. But now you're not gonna do that thing again when you don't feed them because you know, like you now move with precaution. You know, so even though you forgive them for like forgive the dog for like attacking you or whatever, and because you love the dog, you're like, I'm going to show grace and compassion. Your memory gives you this protective thing that makes you know that like now when you move forward, move with knowledge, like move with understanding that this could happen, you know, in this type of circumstance and situation. And that's what happens too. Like say for example, you are say for example you're forgiving someone, I guess, for betrayal, right? Cheating or whatever. So now it's like because you love the person, all the rest, you make that decision to forgive and to move past it. But now certain actions trigger you. You know, say for example, you see them taking a call outside or something like that, outside of your company. You see them hanging out a little bit later than when you expected them to, like, you know, be back home or whatever the situation is. Like something would happen where because of what your past experience, like your memory of, you know, the pain that you experienced before, it sends you all the way back into this like mode of I'm angry, you're doing me dirty, or you're taking me for granted, or, you know, you think I'm stupid. Like you just start saying things that, like, I guess your ego is trying to hold you together from and all the rest. And it just, it sends you to, it sends you to dark, dark, dark places, right? Because, yeah, like when people say things like forgive and forget, the forget part isn't easy. The forget part isn't like you don't just let go, all right? It's like you forgive them because you care, because you love them, because they're your friend, they're your mother, their family, and all the rest. We forgive them because we care about them and we want to progress our relationships with them. We want them to grow stronger and healthier. But we also understand that in order to safe keep and guard our hearts and all the rest, we have this thing that tells us like, now don't trust them with certain information, now don't do this, don't extend yourself in that way, don't this and that, because you don't want to repeat that feeling again, you don't want to experience that suffering again. And it can become so destructive, you know, not forgetting, And, I never try to put that expectation for somebody to forget, but it can become so destructive because we can turn into monsters because of our inability to let go of the pain that was caused, inflicted on us, right? We can turn into really, really cruel people. We can begin to be passive aggressive, hold resentment towards the other person, harbor negative emotions essentially when it comes to that person. And it's so difficult because you care about them, you love them, you all of that kind of stuff. But there's this thing either in the back of your mind or inside of your heart where like you're growing and brewing this energy of hate or this energy of just like because you can't get over the fact that they did this to you, that they hurt you, that they disappointed you, that they let you down, that they betrayed you. It feels like you're growing this thing, and so you even start bargaining with their mistakes and their failures and all the rest. You start saying stuff like, because you did this, I'm gonna do that, because if you're gonna do that, because you did this in my past or whatever, I should be allowed to do this. It's like you want an excuse to be a terrible person, to respond in terrible ways, to just not show up better because you don't want to be the person before that you felt was good and kind because you felt like that version of you was the one that was taken advantage of. And so it's a lot easier to now try either do like a tit for tat or to get even and all the rest. And like I said, it creates a monster in us because we can't let go of the fact that this has happened to me. This is an event that has taken place, and we think, this like victim thing. It's so easy to dwell in it because we believe that we are deserving of special treatment afterwards. You know what I'm saying? We believe that we are deserving of extended grace and all the rest. Like just and we think it's okay to be unreasonable, essentially is what I'm saying, because of the hurts that someone has put us through in our past, even though we have told them that we forgive them. It's like it's something that you will always hold them to, something that you will always remind them of, like, remember you did this or whatever it is. Every time when you're experiencing conflict, every time you're experiencing difficulty, you will always attach I guess, the discomfort that you're in to their mistakes, and to the point where you will excuse your mistakes based on their past actions. And that really isn't forgiveness, right? And we think that just because we're choosing to stay in a relationship with a friend, with a coworker, with a family member, whatever, then that's forgiveness. But that isn't. It just means that you're staying in that environment, but it doesn't necessarily equal forgiveness. And so we think like, no, you like, don't you say I forgive you? Like I'm still here, aren't I? But it's like it doesn't feel like forgiveness, does it? It doesn't feel safe here. It doesn't it doesn't feel like you're actively trying to move on, actively trying to let go of the situation. And that's the thing also. It's like sometimes it's not even a conscious thing that we're doing. Sometimes we don't actively um try to make the other person suffer for the pain that they put us through. But I think, like, subconsciously, as I said, we build these walls. And that's also part of the mechanisms we use to show that we're hurt. Is like now we're a lot more guarded. And because, excuse me, because we're a lot more guarded, we can become emotionally withdrawn. We can build these, like, I guess, isolates essentially as a response to the pain that we're in. And so we don't expose ourselves in the same way. We don't share ourselves in the same way. We don't connect to the person in the same way. And that is also a form of punishment, right? And I get it. Like you do it because it's like you've been hurt now. Like a layer of you that's, trusted them and all the rest is now left vulnerable. And so you don't feel comfortable being who you were with them the way it was in the past. Like now you show up in a different way. And like I said, it's a form of punishment because they can't fully experience you the way that they could, had this not happened. And I guess, and also I'm speaking within reason, right? The within the boundaries of someone who deserves um I guess, a second chance at at a fulfilling relationship with you. That's another thing also though. Like forgiveness isn't earned. Forgiveness isn't something that someone deserves. You know, I'm just thinking about that because I just use the word deserve. It's not something that you look at them and say, you deserve my forgive. Like it's forgiveness is favor over somebody. It's choosing to have grace and compassion for somebody despite what they've done to you, despite the hurt that you feel and all the rest. And it's extending past your own boundaries, past your own values, past what you would have done, your own standards, and saying, I am choosing to show, just as I said, grace and compassion for you and the situation. But I guess to go into why that is so hard is because now we have to absorb all of that pain. Forgiveness is difficult because it feels like we are absolving them of all the suffering that they're meant to experience because we take it all in. And it's such a brave thing to forgive. It's selfless, honestly, to forgive, because it's like this person has done this and all the rest, and you're sitting with yourself and going like, oh, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm all of that kind of stuff. But you understand that in order to progress this relationship with this person, in order to be at peace, you have to take that all in, and you're now also expected to let it go. And that's why we start buffering in our minds. That's why we start going a little bit crazy, and why it's difficult, because it's like, how am I meant to let this go? How am I, and even with yourself, when you're having to forgive yourself, it's like, how am I meant to make peace with the fact that I said that or I did that and all the rest? And it's like that guilt that we just wrap around our necks and hang ourselves with all the time. And it's so dangerous to do that. It's self-harm, in a sense, to also not be able to forgive yourself for things. And it's like you hold it, because you hold on to it because you want it to be a constant lesson that you must learn. And that's what we do with the people we love too, that have hurt us. We want that reminder to be a constant lesson that they must learn. But it almost feels like when we forgive, we're saying it's okay. And that's why it's so difficult to forgive, because we feel like saying I forgive you is condoning that behavior. But it's a misconception. I think forgiveness is saying, I recognize that this happened, but for the sake of, more importantly, my own peace, I cannot hold you to that mistake. I cannot hold you to that failure. I cannot hold you to that decision of yours and all the rest. I cannot spend the rest of my life attaching myself to this negative feeling. And forgiveness is not to absolve you from learning the lesson, from growing, from becoming better, from recognizing that something is wrong. It's okay to condemn something. It's okay to say that this is not okay, that this will not be allowed, that this is your boundary. But I think that's what we need to understand, is forgiveness isn't, it's not acceptance for the action that was done, but more acceptance for the person or the situation. So for you, that you are a work in progress. Acceptance for the fact that you're a human being that will make mistakes, and this was one of them. Acceptance for the fact that the person you love will let you down. The person you care about will sometimes come up short. That the person you really respect will sometimes have things that aren't so great about them. And it's accepting that, okay, it happened, it was said, it was done, it was, all the rest. But I think, as I said, it's a muscle that we constantly need to work at, because you're not going to forget today or tomorrow. But every time when you choose to forgive again, you're growing that muscle, so your recovery time is a lot quicker. Instead of taking 10 days to be upset and be mad about it all over again, now you just give yourself a moment to, like, yeah, I feel it, and then release it. You know what I'm saying? I feel that tension. I feel, I'm triggered or whatever. But then it's like, as I said, you learn to forgive again. and again, and that's really what's essentially happening, is you're forgiving the same situation over and over for as long as you need to, until it doesn't pose as a trigger to you anymore. Yeah, it doesn't happen once. And I know people like say stuff like in the beginning, like, I'm not ready to forgive. And I think it's just because you're not ready to accept that this happened, because I think also sometimes we want to validate our sense of pain. We want to validate our anger. We want to validate why we're wilding out, why we want space, why we're saying the things that we say and doing the things we do. And we feel like if I have to forgive you, then you're taking away my rights to feel those things. You're taking away my space to experience just my disappointment, because now I'm expected to move forward. Now I'm expected to make peace with the situation. And like, that's the thing, like, why sometimes we delay forgiveness, is because we need time to be angry, or we feel like we do, at least. And it can get really scary in that sense, because now we're allowing the pain and anger and frustration and the emotion to control us and consume us, rather than letting ourselves observe the event that has happened. We become the event that has happened. And not everything is that personal. Not everything is meant to take over your life in that way. If anything, not much is meant to take over your life in that way. It really is true when they say, like, you get to decide for how long you want to keep experiencing something. I remember there was a time when I was just so frustrated, and I was frustrated for so long, until, like, I guess I woke up one day and I was like, I don't think I want to feel like this anymore. And it's like, that realization of, you don't have to if you don't want to. You don't have to be this angry if you don't want to. You don't have to keep picking up um that frustration if you don't want to. And I think that's also what I mean about the muscle that you're practicing, is like learning that the growth happens when you stop picking up old pain, when you stop picking up old frustrations and stuff like that. Like, that's when you genuinely, I guess, have your breakthrough, is realizing that you don't have to carry that weight anymore. And it's not easy, it's not simple, it's not a quick fix. It doesn't happen in a day. It happens in several days, several weeks, several months, maybe even a year, and it always catches me off guard every time I thought I've forgiven a situation, and then I'm quite back to that feeling again. I don't know what to do, and I never want to bring it up again, because I tell myself, like, but didn't you say you forgive it? Especially when it comes to myself, especially when I'm remembering things I did years ago, and I'm like, oh, why did I act that way? Why did I do that? Why did I allow that? Why did I accept that? Why did I put myself through all of that? And I get so tense and so frustrated, and I feel all of these things, and it's and it's like trying to, as I said, it's a muscle that we have to keep learning and practicing, and it's a skill. You need to, it's like you develop I guess a layer, a shield around it, where it cannot harm you anymore. Where those memories and things that remind you and all of that, they can't hurt you anymore. They're just thoughts that are passing through. And you can, like, just observe the thought and then let it pass through. Like, yes, okay, cool. I'm in a moment when, like, I'm remembering or I'm triggered or whatever, but then you can also just let it pass through, as I'm saying, like, let it release you, so that you're not bound to that chain of, like, oh, why why. And yeah, like, it's an active thing that you have to keep on doing. And it never gets simpler, because also sometimes the things that we have to forgive get bigger, they cost more, the weight of it is a lot heavier. The people who we're having to forgive are a lot closer. And yeah, so I think, if anything, start with the little things. Start with forgiving yourself about something that happened yesterday or whatever. There's something so small or whatever. And just keep thinking about ways, you can learn to forgive yourself, so that when bigger things come, it's not something you attach yourself to, but something you're understanding. You're just being challenged in this moment to, I guess, lift a bigger weight, essentially. And allow for that forgiveness to happen too. But yeah, the truth about forgiveness is that it doesn't happen once, but that it happens over and over and every time you remember. And so, like this quote that I read last week was, and when you remember, forgive again. And yeah, that's really what I wanted to say. Like, especially if we're trying to build healthy relationships with people, is even on the times when we feel like we're taken back there all over again, forgive again. As always, I'm sending my love. Goodbye.
What in the 20s is going
In the
on?
20s,
Think about
yes.
the 20s.
What
baby.
in the 20s?
What in the 20s is
I
going
am
on?
here for my 20s, baby.
This is the 20s.